on the cloud. Woohoo! That's a new feature. Okay. So I'll direct it this way. There.
All right. Can y'all see this? Someone give me a quick thumbs up. I can see you all. Yay, I like to see it. Okay, amazing. So if you guys have access to the Zoom chat, that would be amazing. If you don't, that's okay. You're welcome just to shout at me. I can hear you all. We'll make it work. So super excited to be presenting to you all today. Really nice to meet you all, even though we are across states. Let me put this in full screen. So yeah, like I said, anything goes wacky with the tech, just let me know, save me from some embarrassment. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what's after graduation. With all you graduating relatively soon, it seems like there is a lot out there. It is really intimidating to kind of start this next step. So just a few years ago, I was honestly in your shoes. I graduated my master's degree about 2 years ago, and I had no idea what I was doing, like flat out, no idea what I was doing. No resume, no LinkedIn, and literally didn't know how to look for a job. So I'm going to break some stuff down for you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do, what big tech looks like, what small, teeny tiny tech, which is like what I work in, looks like, and all kinds of stuff. So I'm a list person. I make agendas. It's kind of my type. So this is my kind of style. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, what I do in my role specifically at Captivate IQ. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about talent as a function, aka why have you never heard of it before? Most of the time, people graduating from uni are have never heard of recruiting, have never heard of talent organizations and companies. So it can tend to be pretty new. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. We'll talk about resumes, LinkedIn. A lot of this stuff gets really overwhelming. Trust me, I empathize. So I'm going to give you some starting points, whether you already have like the best resume out there ever built, or you've never even heard of LinkedIn. I got you covered. We'll talk a little bit about networking, and as I put it in a not scary way, networking, especially if you're quite introverted, such as myself, it can be really intimidating, as well as networking in 2021 in a virtual environment can be a little tricky. So I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with it and give you some tips from there. Finally, we'll wrap it up. We'll talk about job interviews. I will give you some pep talks, words of encouragement, again, my style, so always here for that. And like I said, if at any point, there will be some interactivity in this. If at any point you have questions, just throw them in the chat. I have it pulled up and I'll let you know. All right, here's a bit about me. Like I said, my name is Heidi. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns, so feel free to use both if you're comfortable. This is my dog, Moose. He's very cute, and I show him at every presentation and work meeting that I am a part of. So feel free to enjoy. He's sleeping on my feet right now. So I currently work as a technical sourcer at Captivate IQ, which basically means that I'm hiring and interviewing and really actually getting into the nitty-gritty of finding candidates. So finding people from really, really senior software engineers to interns. I've done it all. I have found VPs, and the search is really exciting to me. So that's a little bit about what I do in my role. It's specifically focused around building engineering and product teams for me at a really, really fast pace, which is what we call hypergrowth. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. I'm also the resident Canadian of my company, so I get all the A jokes, but I'm from Vancouver. I did both of my degrees at the University of British Columbia, and I've been growing startup teams for about 2 years now. Outside of work, because everybody has a life outside of work, outside of uni, you can find me hiking. I'm a big hiker. Moose obviously gets a lot of exercise from it. I also stream a lot of games on Twitch for charity purposes, which is really fun, my little passion. And I also am a big fan of making my cup of coffee at home because I have to work remotely. So can't keep dropping $7 at Starbucks all the time. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about Captivate IQ. This isn't super relevant, but I want to give you the context about where I work and the kind of company that I'm operating in to give you a little bit of idea to set the stage, we'll say. So ultimately, Captivate IQ's mission is to bring transparency and joy to commissions management. Our product, and we could read this slide, but ultimately our product is based on the flexibility of spreadsheets. And we are taking all data surrounding sales commissions and making it really, really easy. Much more custom, no code solution for people and non-technical folks to be able to manage their data plans. So I joined Captivate IQ in March of 2021, so not too long ago, about, oh my gosh, it's already October, about 8 months ago. And I was employee number 85. And today in October, we've nearly doubled. We're around 162 employees as of this morning. So back at the beginning of the pandemic, actually March 2020, when things, started to get a little weird, to say the least, we were only 19 employees. So going back to when I say the term hypergrowth, you can kind of imagine that scale. 19 to 85 to 162, like it goes quick. It's kind of like a bullet train here, which is fun. So, and here's a hint, I can cold call on some of you because you have your names up, but I won't cold call on you if you give me some answers. So let's talk a little bit about what concerns you about finding a job after graduation. What's forefront of your mind? You all can raise your hand, shout them out. You can type in the chat, whatever you're comfy with. Yes.
How exactly would you convince an employer with very little, since we're starting with very little experience, should I say, how would you convince an employer to give you a chance? Because it's like that catch-22 I always hear, you can't get a job without experience, but you can't get experience without a job.
The endless cycle. I totally get it. Employers tend to, and specifically, I'll get a little bit more in depth about this, but a very high level overview is young folks and fresh grads are phenomenally talented. They have a lot of passion. They have a lot of potential. So I would say in terms of job interviews, in terms of your resume, you might not be maximizing on your past experience because you don't have that work experience, but you'll be maximizing on your potential. Like, here's what I could do with the skills that I have here in X, Y, and Z. It's kind of tricky to get an employer to take a chance on that. It's a little hard. That's why I'm talking to you today about it, right? So I would say, at a high level, and hopefully this will answer some of this stuff later in the presentation, focus on your potential rather than everything that you've done in the past.
Gotcha.
Anybody else? Okay, cool. I will address a little bit about kind of that endless loop. It's not fun. It's really tricky. And that's actually a huge reason why I got into recruiting. I struggled a lot when I was looking for a job. When I graduated my master's degree, didn't know anything, well, I had a degree, but didn't know how to look for a job. It was tricky. So that's why we have these presentations. That's why we have these conversations. And a huge reason of why I recruit specifically for a lot of young folks and people coming out of uni. All right, let's talk about talent as a function. And I apologize in advance. We have these pretty cringy stock photos for all of our presentations. So we just got to deal with them and update them one day. So this is our little talent team here at Captivate IQ. I always call us lean but mighty. This is our team. And actually, since we took this picture last week, we've had 2 new folks join our team. So we are growing along with the rest of the company, which is really fun. So our talent team consists of sourcers, such as myself, recruiters, which is also kind of myself. I do what we call kind of a hybrid role, sourcing, recruiting. So you own all parts of the process. We also have coordinators, managers, on the pleasant occasion, puppies. This is Matty. She was dog sitting one day, brought a lot of joy to us. It was very cute. So our manager, actually, Chris, guy in the top left, huge reason why I joined the company as well. He has seen a lot of people go. He was like first 50 employees at Twitch, first 50 employees at WeWork. He's seen all these companies grow from operating in a garage in Silicon Valley to what they are today. A lot of you all might know their names. So it's pretty cool. It's definitely a fun ride. And this is a little bit of kind of the breakdown of like how we structure a talent team. Excuse me. So we have a few moving pieces here in a talent team. A lot of times people confuse talent and HR. We are not HR in most organizations. Some organizations you might be, but we are not dealing with like internal HR complaints, any of that stuff that you hear about. It's more, we're finding talent, we're thoughtfully growing a team. So the 3 ways that I break this up here, we are focusing on building processes of what I call a world-class talent organization. There are a ton of moving pieces with job interviewing that I really wasn't aware of until I got into recruiting. To build workflows, processes, trainings, how to kick off jobs. Like there's a ton of things that we need to build and document. And so for a larger company where a lot of this already exists, you kind of just work with what you have. Reason why I like working at Captivate IQ, none of this exists. So we got to build a lot of it, which is kind of in my nature. Another portion is sourcing and hiring great talent. So obviously a lot of candidates apply, but a huge part of talent acquisition is actually finding candidates. So Well, sometimes parts of my job, I block off 4 hours in a day. I get a huge cup of coffee and I spend 4 hours on LinkedIn finding candidates, searching through really, really kind of tricky methods, actually really act as like scraping data from LinkedIn to find good candidates. It can get quite technical at sometimes, so it's kind of fun. It's a nice challenge. And also growing a team with intention and foundation. So a lot of companies grow really, really quickly. And we need to make sure that we're not growing too quickly, or the other case, we're growing too quickly and we don't have a good foundation for the team. That's when we see things like people leaving really early, you know, financial issues, startups going under. Like, we need to have this good foundation before we build the house per se. And a number one thing that I like to say is that we are advocating for you in terms of recruiters. I am very much your partner in crime, and your yang, whatever. We've got your back. There are a lot of not good recruiters out there. I'll be perfectly honest. Biggest thing that I would say is use us as a resource. We're not here to be a filter to prevent you from getting a job. We're here to quite literally piggyback ride you into the finish line. So it's a process. It's a relationship building that, you know, takes a lot of time. But good recruiters are going to be your advocates, and those are the kinds of people you're going to want to be talking to. All right. Any questions kind of first off the bat before we jump into some resume stuff? Go for it.
Sam, go ahead, and then
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned the difference between sourcing and recruiting, but what actually is that difference?
Yeah, totally. So sourcing is finding candidates, like actually finding profiles saying, hey, this person would be a good fit for a front-end engineering role, and then reaching out to them and getting them interested. The second that they're on my calendar, that's recruiting. That's okay, they're actively involved in this job process. So sourcing is what we call top of funnel, finding and prospecting. Recruiting is anything after that initial touch point that says, okay, I'm interested in learning more about Captivate IQ. Then the recruiting process kicks off.
and then
Would there be any tips for like building a dialogue with a sourcer, recruiter, whatever the job title may, and whatever the name of the job title is? Because I know one of the biggest part could be starting a dialogue, and I know it's harder than just how you start a dialogue with your friends, for example.
Yep.
Or
No. It's a great question. And I'm really glad that you're thinking about it, because, you know, I would say utilize recruiters and sourcers in this next step as you look into, you know, job hunting. I actually have some templates for you all in later in the presentation that we'll go over. Like, here are some messages that even I sent out when I was in grad school wanting to connect with recruiters. Honestly, templates are really good. And I always say with these things, you go and start this dialogue with the intent to build a relationship and learn about a company rather than I want a job. Those are two different sides. It's very easy to see through which one is which, and you want to be able to learn a little bit more about the company and the role, rather than, okay, how can this person get me an in? Laura, do you use any LinkedIn Recruiter? Do you use LinkedIn Recruiter exclusively, or other platforms too? I use LinkedIn Recruiter a lot. I also use something called AngelList, which I 100% recommend you all check out.
I love AngelList.
AngelList is so good. It's amazing. We hire a ton from there. And so for context for you all, AngelList is a kind of like a job board where you create a profile, you can apply for jobs, but it's specifically for startups. So if you're excited about that small team, that, you know, startup environment, which I can talk all day about, I really do, that's a great place to start. Cool. Awesome. Good questions. Anything else before we jump into resumes? Cool. Let's do it. Okay. Who feels like making a resume is intimidating? You all have perfect resumes?
No, I think it's intimidating because I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Like I said, not like I said, but I know resumes are more to show past experience, so that's where it can get tricky when you don't have past experience.
Yep. That's the number one question I get, you know, like, what do I put on there if I haven't had a job before? That's a really, really good starting point. Anything else? Well, let's start. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think another thing is just distinguishing what is important to put on our resumes. And like,
Yeah.
that experience in certain things, you know, what you should and shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And another big question I got when I was in college was like, oh, myself, for example, worked part-time job as well as in college. Do I add that stuff on, customer service, stuff that's not relevant to my resume or to this job that I'm applying to? The answer is yes and no. As typical, it's never always as black and white, but I'll tell you a little bit why. So some quick do's for resumes, and I'm keeping these pretty short because I think they're two really, really important things. So include your best, most relevant experience. So while customer service is good, if it can display your, say you've been working as like a cafe lead at a coffee shop, you can say that you have team management experience, you have experience with like building schedules, time management. There are things that are relevant to that role. If there's something, and very rarely is this, that has nothing to do with your professional experience in building skills, then you might not want to include it. But I always say like 10 out of 10, your volunteer experiences, your part-time work, it's always going to be valuable, and it's just going to buffer you a little bit more as you go into the job search in this stage. So talk about your experience with some frameworks, experience with frameworks, programming languages, projects, and more. And I'll show you a method about how to talk through some of this too. Another thing is to call attention to your achievements. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. For the put your most relevant experience in, does it have to necessarily be professional, or could it be just anything? Like if I have a personal project I've been building, could that also count as relevant experience?
Personal projects definitely count. And in fact, they are really the focus of resumes for folks coming out of university, because we know that you don't have that work experience. If you have internships, or it's called co-op in Canada, I don't know if it's called co-op here. If you have that experience, that's awesome. But we expect more to look at those projects, see what you've built before. I even put volunteer work. Like I think it's really good to, show things that interest you and show things that, you're passionate about and get you excited as well. So definitely call attention to your achievements. A big concern I see is when everyone always uses the term we in their resumes. So like, we built this thing when they're talking about a group project, or we increased this by X, Y, and Z. Tell me what you did. Humility is an awesome trait, and it's something that I look for a lot. But tell me how you specifically improved this process, how you built something. It's definitely useful to know that you have amazing team skills, but I also want to hear about what you specifically are doing. Okay, here are some don'ts. I learned this when I got into recruiting, not when I was in the job search. So that's why I'm telling you. Don't include headshot pictures. There are a lot of websites that will make, like Canva, I'm looking at you, will make your resume really pretty, really flashy, and we'll put your picture on it. Don't put your pictures on it. So I always want to see your smiling face, but there are actually often cases where companies, big and small, are required to throw out resumes if they have headshots, so that there's no case for discrimination, both through like conscious and unconscious bias. It is illegal for employers to discriminate based on a whole number of things: race, gender, sexuality, disability status, but it is something called EEOC that protects individuals. So I always say it's better safe than sorry. Don't include your headshot picture so that you don't give someone a reason to throw it away. Yes.
Sorry, I just want some clarification. So like on LinkedIn and stuff, don't put any headshots, just leave it up link profile for the picture.
No, so this is kind of the different, unique distinction, right? LinkedIn is a little bit different because we don't expect it to be blind. Like it's more of a social profile, right? It's a little bit different. It's a professional social profile, I guess we can say. Resumes, often they can be used for blind screening, right? So we want to look at a candidate without seeing what city they're coming from, without seeing what university they're coming from. There are ways that we can make resumes very, just look at the work experience, just look at the brass tacks, so that we avoid any cases of bias. So LinkedIn is totally fine to have all that stuff. A lot of people do a lot of networking, a lot of social posting on LinkedIn, but on your resume, it's a little bit better to keep it off.
Thank you.
Of course. Other thing is, don't submit your resume as a Word document. This is quite silly, but with every what we call an applicant tracking system, so it's a system that manages all of our candidates, lets us see, all their contact information, how they're interviewing, all that stuff. Resumes don't parse through any of these ATSs with a Word doc. So just general rule of thumb, PDF is the way to go. It's a very simple but small, simple thing for your resume to just make it past that kind of first filter of online applications. And also, please don't lie on your resume. I know people say this all the time. I included cute cats so that you don't rely on your resume. General rule of thumb, it's not good. We can see through it. I've heard a number of cases where people have said, oh, I've completed my university degree, and then you back channel and you can get in a lot of trouble. Or, oh, I actually had a job with this company and you didn't. Like it can get a little messy. Stay away from it. This is my sage advice. Don't touch it. And now here I'm going to embarrass myself for you all. So on the left, we'll look at a pretty standard CS resume. This is an example, this isn't a real person. You can see, and kind of like what you were talking about, here are software projects. Here are things that they have built: home automation, temperature sensor with Android interface. Here's some employment that they've done. They were an intern they were a firmware engineer intern. This is what a very like generic CS resume looks like. And I know it's not very pretty. I come from a design background. So when I first heard that this was kind of the ideal, I was like, oh no, my horrific resume right beside it. But it is really good because from a recruiter's perspective, you're scanning through often around 300 to 400 resumes a day. When that comes into mind, you want to kind of get into pattern matching, right? I always want to be able to go to the same place to understand the information that I need to see. So I always say, keep it basic. You can absolutely Google computer science resume format, and that's a great kind of placeholder to go off of. Don't do what I did. This is what happened when I graduated undergrad. I have my picture on it. I have my Instagram on it, all very bad. My team thoroughly made fun of me for this, but it's okay. It's for the purpose of learning. So avoid some of these more unique resume designs. Okay, from there, so we kind of talked about formats. We kind of talked about some do's and don'ts, but let's talk a little bit about how you describe your work. How do you describe your projects or your internships? How do you come up with these magical bullet points? Has anyone heard of the STAR method? Cool.
No.
Okay, we're learning something new today. Well, I went to business school, so I love frameworks, but this one has actually really stuck with me. This is the STAR framework. It's a tried and true method that's really useful for describing your experiences and your achievements. For example, Amazon actually uses STAR a lot in a ton of their stuff, right? Not just recruiting and interviewing, but in their performance reviews, for example. They really, really look for, here's a good, successful way for you to explain your work. I'm gonna let this video outline it because it does a lot better job, but also it's interesting because this video specifically targets job interviews. You can use this framework on resumes and interviews. You can use it on your LinkedIn profile, a whole bunch of different ways. So not just limited to interviews. I am gonna play this. Someone give me a thumbs up if you can hear it.
Nope,
No.
not yet.
Still can't hear it?
No.
Right. So you need, when you do the share, there's a button to click about sharing audio.
Through a series
Did
of
that work?
behavioral interview questions,
Oh, there
the
you
hiring
go.
Perfect. Okay, let's start this over.
Congratulations, you've made it to the interview stage. Through a series of behavioural interview questions, the hiring manager is looking to find out more about how you work and resolve challenges in the workplace. The interview is a great opportunity to demonstrate and expand on your skills, personality, and appetite for the role. While behavioural interview questions don't necessarily have right or wrong answers, there is a method you can use to give better responses. We call this the STAR method, and this is how you can use it in an interview. Situation. To clearly set the context, state the role, the organisation or department where you were working, and provide a brief description of the situation where you demonstrated the capability. Task. Provide a brief description of the tasks that you were required to undertake to address the situation. Action. Describing the actions that you took to resolve the situation is the most important part of your answer. It's very important that you pick a work example where your actions align with the key behaviours being assessed. Results. A really strong workplace example should finish with a great achievement statement. An achievement statement provides the evidence that your actions were effective and should include the outcome. Let's look at how you can use the STAR method to answer a typical behavioural interview question. Could you give me an example of when you had to deliver a solution to an existing problem?
I was working within the recruitment team to address a backlog of candidates in our recruitment software. The backlog was slowing down our system and becoming problematic, especially when entering new candidates. I started by closing off old job positions. Then I realised the main reason for backlog was managers not closing off the job properly. I knew that even with a new system, the backlog would continue if the staff weren't properly trained. I knew I had to come up with a new approach to this problem. Despite my limited experience in compliance, I used my background in training and coaching to help the staff understand the importance of knowing how to use the system properly. Initially, it was unclear which parts of the software they were having problems with. This is when I asked the HR manager for feedback and I interviewed the staff to find out what parts they were struggling with. Based on their feedback, I wrote a training program, wrote a new training guide, recorded a webinar, and created a checklist which I published on the internet for easy access. As a result of my initiative, the backlog became less of a problem as staff were properly trained on how to use the software. In the long term, there were fewer errors in the system and the HR received fewer queries regarding the software.
Now that you understand what a good response looks like, we will run through a poor response. Could you give me an example of when you had to deliver a solution to an existing problem?
My team had to fix some problems in our recruitment software. There was so much old data in there, it was really slow and kept clogging up. It made my job really difficult. We worked on clearing the backlog of candidates, but then we realised the staff weren't properly trained on the software. We created some training materials so hopefully this backlog wouldn't happen again. We thought about every step involved. We used Word and typed up a document, we used Adobe Connect and recorded to a webinar. We shared our training materials online and got our staff to help us clear the backlog. We haven't had a backlog as bad as this one since we did it.
This is a poor response because there aren't enough details to demonstrate the complexity of the task. The candidate also repeatedly used the pronoun we instead of I, which makes it really difficult to understand what they actually did. The resolution was also unclear and no concrete results were evident. Remember, to give the best response, take your time to explain through the situation, task, action, and results of your achievements. By explaining the crucial part you played through each stage, you'll be able to illustrate how you think, behave, and communicate to the interviewer. Good luck.
All right. So one thing that I find interesting about this video is that when she gave her second answer, the one that is the poor answer, I want to emphasize that this isn't bad. This is an instance of, I mean, really what I call selling yourself short. You're not giving yourself the opportunity to really go above and beyond and say all the things that you've achieved. So while your work experience could be really, phenomenal, your projects that you've built have been out of this world, if you can't describe them in a way that really, describes the amount of effort and heart and soul, will say, that you put into this work, it's not going to come across to employers. So that's why I say, that second answer isn't bad, but you can always be stronger. And so that's the one thing that I kind of want to emphasize. Any questions about the STAR method or anything at all right now? Okie dokie.
For review.
Say that again?
Could you possibly post a link to the video in the chat for later review?
Absolutely. Let's do that now. So you'll also have these slides. And so in each of these resources, you'll be able to click on them. They link to external blogs as well.
Sorry.
No, you're totally great. Don't worry. I am going to make a reminder. Otherwise, I'm just going to forget. Cool. Okay. How long should your resume be? I know for various companies, they would skip or pass over your resume if it's way too long. I've also had to do STAR method and internship interviews before. That's awesome. That's super cool. It's very common with a lot of internships because it's STAR is taught a lot in school. So it's very, very great and super applicable even for interviewing senior software engineers, which is what most of my day is today. So different people have different opinions. I say in terms of the resume, you can break the one-page rule. I think that's a dumb, antiquated rule, I'll be honest. But here's what I'll say. If you're going to go into 2 pages, make sure everything is important. I have had 7-page resumes before. I do not have enough hours in the day to read 207-page resumes. If you're going to branch into 2, make sure that everything you explain is concise and important and relevant. I would say 1 is a good sweet spot. It's helpful, but it's never a detriment if you go into 2. Does that answer your question, Daryl? Cool. Awesome. Let's talk about LinkedIn. How do we feel about it? Do we have it? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs like, thumbs down, thumbs up. It's okay. I kind of feel thumbs down about LinkedIn sometimes too. So much that this is generally like my general reaction when it came to LinkedIn when I was graduating. LinkedIn can be really overwhelming and also just kind of frustrating. You just spent all this time building a resume. Now, do you really want to like build an online profile and network and keep up with it like another social media? For me, I didn't until I really dug into some of the nitty-gritty benefits of it. So here is why I'm going to give you an overview of really why LinkedIn is going to help you, especially in 2021 when so much is online. Job interviews are online, connecting to recruiters are online. This is where you're going to be golden. This is the wordiest slide I'll have, I promise. So here's why it's your BFF. You are going to be able to build a professional presence online so that sourcers can find your profile. Like Laura said, LinkedIn Recruiter is kind of my #1 go-to. I use other platforms like AngelList. I've recruited off of TikTok before, which I think is hilarious. Twitter, like I find people from in all different quarters, right? But LinkedIn is a really, really good go-to. It's also easier on you. So it's easier for you to apply to roles through LinkedIn. They have their own job board where a lot of employers and specifically tech companies take advantage of the job board. So it saves you from having to enter this awful loop of like you enter your resume, and then their internal system says, can you please re-enter every single project that you've ever done with every specific date and all these descriptions? Like it's exhausting. So LinkedIn kind of enables you with this one-click apply feature that they have that I 100% recommend. It's very useful. So networking, 2021, we haven't been outside in a very long time. It's hard to meet people. And networking is really valuable for getting that first role. It helps break that barrier that we talked about at first to have an employer take a chance on you, especially as you're graduating. You want to be able to connect with them on a professional level, on a personal level, and really kind of build that relationship because building relationships really, really helps you open doors. It's also much easier to update your LinkedIn than different versions of your resume that you have all over in your downloads folder, desktop, or wherever. LinkedIn is kind of a good place to have for your single source of truth for any kind of employment stuff. So let's start with the basics. These are kind of the 4 main parts of LinkedIn that we really care about as recruiters. Photo and headline, if you don't have a photo, it's okay, do whatever makes you feel comfortable. And these are all actually colleagues from my team at CIQ. So Emily is one of our recruiters for the sales team. And our team in particular has a really big focus on inclusivity, diversity, and belonging. We build diverse tech teams. Huge reason why I joined Captivate IQ. So her headline focuses on, okay, here's what she's doing. She's building Captivate IQ with a focus on what we call DIB. There's a summary portion. This is my summary and talks about what I'm doing right now. Currently building a team at Captivate IQ where we're looking to build, where we're working to modernize the world of commissions. We're hiring, here's my email, etc. I always like to talk about my personal life outside, on my LinkedIn profile. I think it's really good. You are not just limited to your personal or to your professional experience and your schoolwork, like you're a whole person outside of that. So I always talk about fun things that I'm interested in, that I enjoy, and it just helps kind of break the ice a little bit, start some of those conversations. Work experience. So this is from one of my engineering managers, Andrew Shao. He's awesome. And this was from his time at Thumbtack, which is a pretty big tech company here in the Bay Area. You can see how he is very concise with how he describes his accomplishments. He doesn't go too deep into, I was at Thumbtack for X amount of years and blah, blah, blah. Like we can see all that. So he led rollouts of instant results, company-wide transition from Angular to React. That's a big migration. Implemented and promoted adoption of coffee delivery. Like there are his achievements in a pretty concise way, which is, easy to read, easy to digest. LinkedIn also is really useful that it, allows you to post ultimately media. So he has like a blog post, some stuff about Thumbtack, definitely utilize it. Especially if your projects are live on the internet, never hurts to link to your GitHub, to any projects that you have live. We all want to see it. It's interesting to people like me. And references. This is from my manager, Chris, and he has been doing recruiting for quite a bit longer than I have. So he has some stellar references. And so you can see that, people are advocating for him, saying that we worked together for X amount of time. This is what he did. This is why it's really successful. And then some great headlines from recent graduates. So a big question I get is, what do I even put on my headline? I don't have a job right now. Like, where do I even start there? I really like some of these from new grads. I like when it says seeking new role, aspiring project manager. It tells me what you want. I don't have to guess and play 20 questions. Do they want software engineering role, data engineering role, ML internship? You know, it's very direct for what you need. Always great to see where you went to school. It targets a lot of alumni, and seeing what you're familiar with: Java, Rails, C#, Scrum, Agile, Kanban. These are a lot of words that you'll definitely become familiar with, but ultimately I like to get a snapshot understanding of what you're looking for and what you can do, even if you don't have something that you're actively doing now. Any questions before we continue? Okie dokie.
So-
Oh, sorry. I always seem to do that.
It's okay. So you would recommend a profile picture on LinkedIn? Because I thought you said you don't have to if you don't want to.
You don't have to if you don't want to. I mean, with profile pictures, it's whatever you feel comfortable with. There's no like recommendation or not recommendation. I would say if you're going to do it, make sure it's a professional picture and not like a selfie, because sometimes that will detract some employers. But most of the time, it doesn't matter. It's your comfort level. Some people don't want a lot of pictures on social media or on LinkedIn. They want it to keep it a little bit more just based on their work. So let that decision be yours. Cool. Okay, let's talk about LinkedIn summaries. It's a big old blank space. It's a text box for you to tell you to ultimately pitch yourself, elevator pitch yourself to employers. Here's my biggest advice for it. Explain your past, your present, and what drives you. What you've been doing in the past. I was at school studying X, Y, and Z. Your present, I am currently looking for a role in X, Y, and Z, and what drives you. For me particularly, you can see if we go back, I say I'm really passionate about goal setting, inclusivity, and diversity in tech spaces and opportunities where I can help people grow and thrive in their dream role. That's a super direct rule of three way of saying, here's what I'm interested in. Here, if you have opportunities that touch on this, I want to hear about them. Show life outside of work. I just think it's fun. It's always nicer, and it just breaks the ice of some of that, like, professionalism that is definitely there, but it's just nice to know you as a human being. Write how you speak. I definitely have read LinkedIn summaries that are like, Heidi Holland has accomplished this in her 10 years of life. Like, no, it's ridiculous. So just write how you feel comfortable with, and ask for what you want. Like I said, be very direct with what you're looking for, even if you don't know. This was a big thing. I didn't really know what kind of jobs to go into. Ask for some things that interest you, or some starting points. It can be multiple, but be very clear about what you're looking for would be my number one advice for LinkedIn summaries. Yes.
When you say ask, should I actually write a question in that box, or should I just say, here is what I'm looking for, something like that?
Yeah, you can say, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an entry-level role in companies that are mission-driven, tech companies or fintech companies or based in robotics. I definitely never, especially if you're actively looking, it never hurts to say, I'm looking for this.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be an actual question. You could just, it's to give someone an idea of what you're looking for.
Exactly. I will say the more amount of context, the more amount of information you put on profiles like this, the less work and effort that recruiters have to do to find you, because you have all this information like handed to you on a plate. It's awesome. And it makes my day when it happens, right? So it helps make the process a little bit easier to give, sorry, there's construction outside of my building, to give all of the context that you can. Recommendations. So a common question I get is, how do who do I get recommendations from? I don't have coworkers. I don't have colleagues or any of that. Utilize your professors. I definitely did this. I've had some professors write amazing references, and they're very, very useful in attesting to your work ethic, to some of your skills, your abilities, and how you operate as a student, and how that might translate into you operating as an employee. Utilize your peers as well. I don't know how heavy y'all's degree is in group work, but mine was very heavy in group work. So I definitely utilized all of my partners and kind of, we all backed each other up and hyped each other up on LinkedIn. It's really useful. And colleagues, if you do have previous internships or co-ops or even just service jobs, have someone in the professional sense be able to attest to your work. Cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about networking online, but I want to pause in case there are any questions. Okie dokie. So 2020 has made us go virtual for a lot of things. We have adapted. I used to work out of a garage in Silicon Valley, really just building like hard metal servers with, as a tech company I worked with previously. Now I have my little home office. It was a big switch for you all. Online classes, exams, career fairs. It's definitely, I have no doubt, been very, very different for you too. So with that adaptability, you can network online too. You can build this community, and networking is kind of daunting and intimidating. It still is to me as someone who does it every day. But the more you do it and the more you practice, the more it becomes just instant for you, and the more it becomes second nature. So this is quite literally what I did when I graduated. I found companies that I thought were cool. I was really into gaming. I said Discord was an up and coming company at the time. Now they're killing it. And I went and looked at recruiters at Discord. I found people, here are the top 2 results at LinkedIn. The second one, Allison, okay, she's a technical recruiter, so maybe not a fit for me, not an engineer. But Siobhan, she's a general recruiter, so maybe I reach out to her. It never ever hurts. Like, LinkedIn profiles are there to help you build connections. I would say a big hesitation I get from students are, oh, I don't want to reach out to this person. I don't want to bother them. It feels weird. It's not. People expect it. People actually welcome it. I've had people reach out to my CTO graduating from college saying, hey, I'm graduating from this degree. I'm really excited about what your company is doing. I want to learn and hear more about it. And the worst they can say is no. So answering the question kind of from the beginning, here are some simple kind of templates that you can use for some of these outreaches. This is what I was doing when I graduated up in Vancouver. A couple of roles I was interested in. I was looking at project coordinators or operations, different kinds of things. And I was very upfront. I said, I'm interested in this role. I think it's really cool. I want to learn a little bit more about the company's culture and goals. I want to learn about the values. I'm looking into opportunities where I can thrive through attention to detail. Hype yourself up without, being too wordy. I like to say short is sweet with this. And always end on a call to action. If you want to get on a call next week, happy to do Zoom. If it's somewhere that's close to you, invite them out for coffee. It's really, really useful. I had a lot of coffee when I was graduating grad school from meeting different people in my network and through my student alumni. It just really helps and benefits. These outreaches can feel a little weird and unnatural. And yes, you will get some responses or you will get some people who don't respond. Don't take it personally. Don't think it's a reflection on you or your work experience. And actually, this can be really, really successful. Every student who reaches out to me this way gets on the phone with me, whether they're qualified for a role or not. And the reason is I want to be able to talk about Captivate IQ to as many people as possible. It doesn't, and that's a priority, right? Where they might not have a job for you, they might know someone, oh, my previous manager is hiring over at Stripe and they're looking for someone that you would be a great fit for. So no connections like this are failed connections. Any questions while we're here?
I actually had a quick question just about messaging recruiters in general.
Totally.
Say there's a company that has more than 1 or 2 recruiters that are on LinkedIn. Is it smart to only message one at a time, or is it a better idea to message multiple?
It definitely depends. I think there have been candidates that have connected and messaged my entire recruiting team, and then everyone's like, oh, hey, I'm getting the same message from this person. Somebody should reach out where they would be a good fit. So that volume always helps. That being said, if you hear back from one recruiter and they're like not interested, I probably, you can ping another person, but don't be like too overwhelming. I don't think it hurts to ping multiple people though. I think it's really useful and it kind of grabs our attention a little bit more. I'll be honest, one of the, biggest frustrations for me when I was looking for a job was I was like, okay, nobody's answering me. Like it's demoralizing. It's not fun. And now that I'm in the workforce, I get like 700 emails a day and I know how easy it is to miss things. So, following up and saying, hey, I hope you didn't miss my previous email, something like that, never hurts. It's never going to be, taken as a negative from anybody. All right, Dustin's question, since I'm graduating in the spring, when would be a best time to start reaching out like this about a job or after I graduate? I would say if you're looking for a job, if you're looking to apply for jobs for the spring, I would start connecting with recruiters now. You don't need to be applying to jobs, but something that I think will be really useful is connect with recruiters who are specifically university recruiters. These exist in bigger companies. Unfortunately, they don't exist with Captivate IQ. We're too small. One day we'll get there, but university recruiters are always looking for what we call in like peak hiring seasons, which is typically when semesters end. So Dustin, I definitely recommend that you reach out to some of them and say, hey, I'm graduating in the spring. I'd love to learn more about roles that are opening up then for university students or for entry-level roles. And if it's for smaller companies, it never hurts just to start building a network. And then when the time comes around, when it is spring, you can say, okay, I have these 3 people that I talked to 2 months ago, and now I can go back and see if they have any roles. With this stuff, and especially alongside school, it can be a lot with exams and with the end of the semester and graduation. I'd say start early. Just start early and save yourself a little bit of time towards the end. Cool. Hope that was helpful. Anything else?
Is there a specific way to know who the university recruiters are compared to just regular recruiters?
So it'll typically be in their title. If you go to LinkedIn, and I'll pull up LinkedIn at the end of this presentation and we can kind of, go through it. You can quite literally just search university recruiter. It's often in their job title and it'll show up first thing. If their title isn't university recruiter, then they might just be more of a general recruiter. That's fine. Or they work with an organization such as myself where they don't have university recruiting. But like the Facebooks, Amazons, Lyft, like they will all have those.
Is there any particular reason to go for a university recruiter over just a normal recruiter or vice versa?
I would say if you want to go to a very, very large tech company, what we call FANG, Facebook, Amazon, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting Netflix, Google, there's another A in there.
Apple.
Oh my goodness, Apple, thank you. Thank you, it's been a long day. If you want to go to those, university recruiting, they are specifically looking for students to kind of grow alongside those big companies. For smaller companies, mid-sized companies, I would say a general recruiter. They either will not have university recruiting or they're going to be looking for people who are graduating and wanting to have a little bit bigger of an impact, right? University recruiting can sometimes go into rotational programs, which is great because you can touch a lot of different things at one company. But if you're in a space where you really want to build a product from the ground up, startup might be a better way to go if you want to kickstart from there. Depends on how much support you want in your role. I went into startups because I kind of liked the chaos and the fire. It was fun. Some people really don't like that. So, definitely depends on that. So sorry if you can hear a plane above me. Can we follow up by calling them instead? You can, if you have their phone number. It never hurts to call, and honestly, you get a little bit more response from calls anyway. I definitely have candidates that call me up, from time to time. It is a little, we don't have a lot of people who do that, but I think it really kind of sets you apart because it shows that you're going the extra mile. You can call and then send them a follow-up email if you don't hear from them. Cool. Okay. Let's get creative. I want to be conscious of our time. We've only got 15 minutes. So we can get creative with being online career fairs, virtual conferences, Slack groups, online communities, do some Googling, do some research. You can find amazing Slack servers that all have people that are really helping to look for jobs. Slack servers for X companies or people who are really interested in machine learning, do some research, take a look around. I know that you all are a Handshake company or a Handshake campus. So I don't have too much familiarity with Handshake because we don't use it at Captivate IQ, unfortunately. But my colleagues in particular really, really love it. A bunch of my recruiter friends at Facebook find it to be absolutely phenomenal. They have a lot of success with hiring fresh grads. So I would definitely utilize it, make a profile. I know it's a lot of profile making, but it always pays off in the long run, I promise you. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about interviews. Any stress points about interviews here?
what as the interviewee should we be looking for in an employer? Because I know a lot of throughout my time when people talk to me about it, it's always like, oh, well, here's what you should present to the employer. But as I research myself, it's like, no, you're also trying to see if they're a good fit for you.
Yes.
So it's kind of like a balance of like, you're not trying to be too nosy, but at the same time, you're trying to get a feel of what the company is like without actually having to work there.
Totally. Interviews are a two-way street. Good companies will know this. They will want to hear your questions as much as, you know, the other way around, right? Come prepared with questions for things that matter to you. If it's work-life balance, if it's a tech stack that you're working on, if it's being able to work remotely, have those questions prepared and ask them. Interviewers are always going to leave 10 minutes at the end of every interview for your questions. So make sure that they're prepared. Cool. Okay. Let's start with what an interview loop looks like for an engineer. It's the biggest factor you found in whether someone continues from an interview. It's really how they describe their work is a really, really big priority. If you can talk to me, and this is a really good example for you all. Sometimes engineering candidates get really caught up in the technical jargon. I don't have the context of the technical jargon. I don't come from a technical background. So I always say, try and describe your work like you're describing it to a high schooler. You can understand, you know, high level what you're working on, what you've been building. If you can do that and you can describe technically coherently what you've been doing and be quite concise with it, it's going to be really successful. Okay, this is what our interview looks like at Captivate IQ. You have an initial call with me. You talk to a hiring manager, you do a technical screen with an engineer, and then you meet the team. Every company will have their own processes. So it's really important that you ask in that initial call what their interview process looks like so that you're aware early on. Technical interviews. So here's my disclaimer. Like I said, I'm not an engineer. I haven't gone through these technical interviews. I've helped build a lot of them. But I went to my engineering team to get some advice. They're the experts. Faith is one of the first engineers I hired here at Captivate IQ. She says every technical interview is practice for your next technical interview. Even if you feel like you did terribly in it, think about what went well and what you can improve on. I think that's really, really important that you treat every interview as a practice for your benefit. That's huge. Faith has also done a phenomenal job of compiling a full list of resources for computer science technical interviewing that you all can access here. So that will be, you know, in your inboxes so that you can have it. At the end of the day, really big point, technical interviews don't necessarily measure your capability as an engineer. So here's some of these resources. Coding practice resources, Leak Code is really big. Review material resources, a couple different things. You'll be able to, you know, access all these and read a little bit more. For an entry-level position, what's a good answer to the question, what salary are you looking for? Oh, that's hard. That's really hard. I think it's really tricky. You can do some research on Glassdoor to get an understanding of what market salary rates are for you in your area. They differ on companies. They differ on where you live in the world. San Francisco, for example, has really, really out of this world cost of living, so our salaries tend to be much higher. Different places in the world, it's a little bit different. So use Glassdoor and another resource called salary.com, and also take into consideration, you know, what's important for you to live, to, you know, start off, you know, have a good starting point for your salary. It's a little bit of financial math for yourself as well. But there is no good answer. You just be comfortable with it. And then additionally, if you don't feel like sharing numbers at that time, which you're totally welcome to do, recruiters will never press you about it. You can always say, I want to meet more of the team more, and then I'm happy to talk about salary a bit down the road. Ideally, you kind of want us to talk about the numbers first. You want to make sure that, you know, we're putting you in a good space. So put a little bit of pressure on your recruiters. It's good for us. It's healthy. All right. Evan gave a great point that you should be asking questions during technical interviews. Part of the interview is taking a possibly vague prompt and building something from it. Interviews want to see if you have been given a vague problem and figure out clarifying points. This is the #1 reason why I see people fail technical interviews. They don't ask questions. They jump right into the code 30 seconds in, or they sit there and they program in silence for 20 minutes and we have no idea what they're thinking. So make sure that you're really talking through your work, making sure that you're asking clarifying questions to get an understanding of, you know, the situation that you'll be operating in. Those are the 2 biggest downfalls that we've seen at Captivate IQ and at my company previous. Is there a distinct difference between a technical interview and a normal interview? Technical interview will be where you are programming, where you are doing like a systems API design question is really big with us, where you'll be presented a product feature and asked how you would, design it. For new grads, it's typically just coding exercises. That's pretty much about it. And I would say do some resources, do some research into like LeetCode code to see what some of those questions look like. Normal interviews tend to be a little bit more behavioral. Captivate IQ in particular is really values driven. So we want to get an understanding of, is this person really humble? Is this person focused on transparency? And so that's a little bit more like a conversation, some of those where you'll see the tell me about a time when you whatever, that's what you'd see in more of a normal interview. Often when you talk to engineering managers, they're going to want to know what you want to do in your career too. If you don't know, that's fine. I mean, it's a hard question, right? But talk about some things that interest you about the future, where you want to go. All these kinds of things fall into interviews, but technical is going to be strictly technical. You will be programming. Some general interview etiquette: prepare, have questions prepared. I cannot stress this enough. Don't go into an interview and wing it. I've done it before. It's been a nightmare. Don't do it. Do your research. See who you're interviewing with. Look them up on LinkedIn. Check out their GitHub if they have it. Talk about, see if any of their projects are interesting. And make sure that you have those questions prepared. Watch the clock both before and during. Technical interviews especially, you can get a little lost and sometimes you're 20 minutes setting up and then you only have 10 minutes to go and it can get a little stressful. So make sure you watch that clock, have a good eye on and like awareness of where you're at, just, for your own sake. And don't be afraid to take notes during the interview. I'm a very visual person. I love writing notes. It just helps me memorize things and helps me remember things. And like we said, you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. So take notes on the company, see what's interesting. So when it comes down to it, you can say, okay, here's what I really liked about the company. Send a thank you note. It's really nice. You don't have to go above and beyond and like mail something to your recruiters. Please don't do that. It's kind of weird. But nice little email, text message. A lot of recruiters are texting with candidates these days. So just something nice to say. Thanks for your time. Thanks for interviewing. Some more resources on technical interviews and some preparation behind it. Okay, last of all, you have got this. Job hunting is a little scary and quite intimidating. And to be perfectly honest with you, it can be a little demoralizing here too. Utilize people who will hype you up. You will get there. And I will say that searching for the first job is the hardest to do. Once you start building a network, once you start building that community, it just gets easier and easier. So think of this as your first hurdle you have to get. And then once you're over it, it just is a little bit more smooth sailing. So, okay, let's wrap up. I am here for you at any time. Even though I'm physically not in the classroom with you, feel free to connect with me. Have coffee or virtual coffee with me. If you're ever in the Bay Area, let me know. I'm happy to show you around and talk to you about cool companies. I think when it comes to job hunting, having people that, hype you up, look over your resume, make sure things look okay, is really, really valuable. It keeps you on track. So I am happy to help in any way that I can. I keep in touch with a number of students that I used to TA for when I was in college, and I really, really help them and guide them through this process. Something I'm passionate about, something I care a lot about. So please feel free to email me, connect with me, and throw any and all questions that you have at me. And then we got a little bit of time for questions. So if you have them, feel free to throw them at me.
I'd like to ask everybody to put their name and email address in the chat. And I'm hoping that Heidi will print that off or copy paste that off.
I can do that. And Rick, to answer your question, yes, sometimes we hire our friends. It's called referrals. Yes, we can be friends, but it's great to make friends in the tech space because referrals are actually the #1 way to get hired in the tech environment. So that's why networking is important. Thank you for your emails. Thank you for your names. How long does a technical interview usually take? It depends. Typically they're around 60 minutes, especially for new grads. They tend to be 60 minutes with the question with some buffer time, right? We understand that you're going through some technical interviews and like it's kind of your first time at this. So typically the question will take, like the actual question will take around 30 minutes, but some of the setup and, questions and time to get there will bleed into that 60 minutes. So we give you time. Some technical interviews will be 30 minutes, but it's very, very rare. You need to have that time to set up.
In terms of putting things on the resume, you mentioned for kind of stuff outside of work that could still, like personal projects or volunteer work that still could be good. Would you want to, in that case, focus more on the skills you gained from those activities rather than the activities themselves? For example, I'm in a quartet, so I want to focus more on the skills I got from the quartet rather than just be in that quartet itself.
I think that's awesome. I think that's a great way to approach it. For example, I do a lot of charity work, a lot of like charity video game organization stuff. When I talk about that, I talk about the actual skills that I'm getting when it comes to organizing a team, to marketing an event, stuff like that. That's what I touch on, not necessarily like, hey, I was just doing this event and it was cool. Really draw out some of your skills from it. So awesome way to go about it.
What type of analysis does your company actually do?
What type of analysis?
Yeah.
Yes, so cut your mic and just shout.
Oh, okay, I'll just shout. Yeah, what does your company do, and in like which program do they primarily work in?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of our tech stack, we use a lot of Python here. So Python, and we use Django on the back end, React on the front end as well. Our frameworks are pretty modern. I would say Python is pretty hot these days with a lot of tech companies, JavaScript and Node.js as well. We're kind of in this interesting space where we're exploring, okay, how can we utilize new frameworks and how do we evolve Captivate IQ's platform? A little bit of context, we've built this really great commissions product. Now we're saying, how else can we provide value to sales teams? And so with that comes a little bit more like, okay, now we get to actually start from scratch. We get to decide on a tech stack. We get to start all this stuff. So I hope that answers your question in terms of analysis. I'm not sure if I did, but let me know if I didn't.
I have a question.
Yes.
You did mention like your company is more value driven. I'm not sure exactly what those values are though. I'm curious about
Totally.
in a bit more what those are.
Yep. So I have been part of the startup, part of startups, and some of them have been, you're working at your desk for 16 hours a day, the hustle, the grind, the buzzwords, all that stuff. Captivate IQ has an emphasis on values in both transparency and humility. As a startup, it's really important that you do your due diligence to make sure that the company that you're joining is secure. Sometimes startups, they rely on funding. They rely on these big sessions of funding where they gain money to continue their operations. So you want to make sure that companies have good funding. You have to do all this due diligence to make sure everything's good. In terms of values, I want to make sure that all that information is transparent to me. And I want to make sure that I work with a team that's collaborative and humble. That's what drew me to Captivate IQ. A lot of companies, companies will all have their own values. You can Google any company and then put values after it and see what comes up. Most companies have like a mission statement. But Captivate IQ's was really good for me because it focused on work-life balance. It focused on collaboration and viewing engineering very much not as a solo sport. It's interesting because as a recruiter, you tend to like float. Sometimes in organizations, you'll float between different departments, design, engineering, whatever. I'm very much like, I am ingrained with my engineering team. I attend their stand-ups, I'm involved with them, and it's a team effort, right, for hiring. And so that kind of value mentality is really important to me and was important to me when I was looking for a job. Cool. Anything else?
What kind of positions are you hiring at your company right now?
We are hiring, I'm going to stop screen sharing so that I can see well. We're hiring a lot of senior roles right now. I'll be perfectly honest. Beginning of the year, we will be hiring quite a few more juniors and new grads. We sometimes do apprenticeships for people who are graduating or have come out of boot camps or different sorts where you will do like an internship or a 12-week program working on one of our teams. Those typically open up around January. So definitely feel free to reach out to me if anything comes up like that. And I am super happy to answer in terms of roles that open. But senior software engineers are my big priority right now. And Jarrett, I see your question. What sort of characteristics do you look for in a person during an interview? Humility is really big for me. I know I touched on this a couple of times. The reason why humility is really big with me because it shows how people work well together. So if I can get an understanding of this is going to be someone who's going to elevate others, who's going to, if their colleague runs into a problem with their code or their project, they're going to jump in and help. That's really, really important to me. Additionally, I think just generally, concise communication is also important. It's a really, really hard skill, something that I'm still very much learning at, to be able to, professionally communicate and communicate your skills. It can be a little awkward sometimes. And it's a very hard skill. Someone who can do that is really, really important. So I say practice in front of the mirror before your interviews, because it helps you out a little bit more. Cool. All right, well, if there's nothing else, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you all, getting to meet you. I know it's a little weird with me over Zoom and you all in the classroom, but I really appreciate you all, letting me come into your class and talk to you. And I hope that I was able to be helpful and answer some of your questions.
Outstanding presentation, Heidi. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And don't forget to reach out to me, email me. I'll send the slides along to you all. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye-bye.